You're listening to The Bill Bennett Show.
Let's welcome Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. Senator Cotton, let's look forward. What do we do now? What do we do now internationally? What do we do now about China? If you will, focus it on the legislation that is it Mike Gallagher? I think you and Mike Gallagher.
Yeah, Mike Gallagher and I have introduced legislation that would end America's dependence on Chinese pharmaceuticals. I think most Americans are shocked to learn that we depend on China for basic staples of our healthcare, things like penicillin, antibiotics, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, to say nothing of dozens and dozens of precursors that are made in China and then mixed into final drug products. My legislation would very simply say we're going to put an end to this. It would give incentives for manufacturers to bring back pharmaceutical manufacturing from China by letting them, for instance, immediately expense the capital expenditures of building new factories in the United States. It would also create a market for that supply by saying all the federal agencies, Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, the Department of Defense, will have to buy a few years out all their drugs from non-Chinese sources. That is just about pharmaceuticals. We're ultimately going to need to go a lot farther than that. Unless it's like a toy or a trinket or a lawn chair bill, we don't need to be buying it in China anymore, period.
Good. You and Mike Gallagher. Mike Gallagher served with one of my sons in the Marine Corps, so that's good. Good guy to be with, and you're a good guy for him to be with. How did this happen? Was this part of the permanent normal trade relations that we ended up doing all this with China? I was at Empower America. I don't know if you remember that. You may be too young, or you were in combat or something. But Jack Kemp and Gene Kirkpatrick and Don Rumsfeld, and I was another add-on, and they all went for permanent normal trade relations with China, and I said no. And the argument was, you remember, Tom, the more we deal with China, the more we will soften them up to capitalism and get them off communism. I don't think that happened. But was this part of it, normal trade relations?
Yeah, so Bill, there was, let's call it an experiment going back about 30 years. And the premise of the experiment is, as you say, is that let's open up with China, let's trade with them, let's outsource a lot of our factories and jobs there, and capitalism will change China. Unfortunately, as we've seen, China has changed capitalism. Just look at what they're doing now, threatening Americans with death by withholding things like antibiotics. Look what they did when a NBA executive tweeted his support for democracy protesters in Hong Kong. They threatened to exclude the NBA from its largest overseas market. So even the term that you're using, Bill, permanent normal trade relations, was an Orwellian change to what had been used for decades. The term had always been most favored nation status. And you had multinational corporations and Wall Street that was desperate to make money off of China. So they lobbied hard in the 1990s. They recognized that term was bad. They changed it to permanent normal trade relations. They finally got it through Congress with Bill Clinton's support. And then we admitted China into the World Trade Organization, which again was an idea that it was going to change the way China operated. I say that it was an experiment because so many people in both parties believed it at the time. But over time, it should have been recognized as a failed experiment, and we should have put a stop to it long ago. I believe now that China has unleashed this plague on the world, most Americans recognize that partnering with China, outsourcing our productive capability over there, sending jobs there has been a failed experiment, and they're ready to stop it.
You follow this stuff very closely. I follow a piece of it closely. With the ironies here, I'm told that one of the drugs that the Chinese are withholding legally is fentanyl, which of course is used in a lot of surgeries, but they're not withholding fentanyl, the illegal fentanyl, which they're funneling through Mexico into the United States. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so we have a opioid crisis in this country in no small part because of the introduction of fentanyl into traditional drugs, like heroin, for instance. Fentanyl does have legitimate pain management purposes. It's been around for a long time. It only has hit the streets, though, in the last decade. And one of the ways it has hit the streets, Bill, is that Chinese pharmaceutical giants are intentionally overproducing fentanyl. They are selling it into Mexico. The cartels are then running it into the United States. that is clear and obvious. That's why I introduced legislation with Chuck Schumer, of all people, who has been alive to the threat of China longer than some Republicans, I have to say, to put sanctions on these Chinese officials and pharmaceutical companies who are intentionally flooding our streets with fentanyl. And let's just say, Bill, that I don't think it's an accident that fentanyl is coming from China and creating such wide-scale social problems as we see more people overdosing every year from opioids or from drugs in general than died in the entire Vietnam War. The Chinese Communist Party leaders know that, and they know that it hurts us and it prevents us from focusing our attention more on China and what they have done to undermine our interests all around the world. So I don't think it's an accident that fentanyl is coming from China.
And damn it to hell, as a former drug czar, I can't get people to focus on the right thing. Every time I talk about it, I hear about Big Pharma. When I was in New Hampshire in 2016, all anybody could talk to me, because they knew I was the former drug czar, was you can get fentanyl on the street for $2, $3. It's not the Oxycontin. May have started there, the Vicodin. It's the fentanyl that's cheap. And of course, it's dirty and all sorts of stuff. But people still want to come back to Big Pharma. I think that's the thing about going after the corporations rather than the real enemy, which is the Chinese.
Well, I think obviously there were bad actors in that sector, and a lot of people did get hooked on things like OxyContin, but those kinds of addictions have been addressed in different policy ways by the federal government and our state governments for several years now. What we're facing now, again, it is in no small part fentanyl that is coming from Chinese, and I believe coming intentionally from the Chinese to poison our people.
That's my point again. Ironic, withholding the drugs that'll help us and sending the drugs that'll kill us, right? They're up to something. Let me ask you this, just to follow up. It is a Chinese virus. This is and the president's right to talk about it, and not to retreat from that. I assume you agree. You were on this very early. If you had any further thoughts about the origin, I'm just curious whether it was those open air places or that lab. Do we know any more? Are there any more indications?
So first, you're right, Bill. This is the China virus, and it is not just a matter of being politically correct. It is to say that that's somehow racist or xenophobic. It is actively supporting a Chinese Communist Party disinformation plan, to use any other term. As we speak, Chinese ambassadors in capitals around the world are telling their host governments that this originated with American soldiers who were in Wuhan last year. They are lying. They are lying to the world. They are lying to their own people. As we speak, Chinese language media controlled by the Chinese Communist Party is also spreading that lie. So there's an information war going on. And to say anything other than it originated in Wuhan, it is the China virus, is to play right into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, for your other question, where did this originate? The simple question is, we don't know. We know that it originated in and around Wuhan, the capital city of Hubei province in central China. We do know this. The first origin story that Beijing fed to us is false. They claim that it started in some people call it a wet market, some people call it, exotic animal market, what have you. There was an authoritative study done in early January. This is one of the first things I read and learned the extent of the Chinese Communist Party's lies and how bad it must therefore be. Chinese scientists identified 14 of the original 40 cases from December and early January that had no contact with that market whatsoever. So that market may have acted as an accelerant in later stages, but the virus went into that market before it came out of that market. So the simple answer is we don't know, and if the Chinese Communist Party has its way, we probably won't ever know, because they're not letting internationally respected scientists and experts go to Wuhan. They just kicked out reporters from China, from the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times. So they are acting as if they have something significant to cover up.
But someone said to me, all right, very possible, but if they were going to do intentional biological warfare, this would be a kind of sloppy way to do it. Is that right or not?
So there is a super laboratory in Wuhan that deals with infectious diseases, to include coronaviruses. You don't have to make the leap all the way to say that China was developing biological weapons in that laboratory to say that laboratory could have played a role in the spread of this virus. So, for instance, it could be perfectly appropriate science, but bad safety practice. So maybe China was researching coronaviruses, therapeutics, or vaccines, or what have you, and ventilation systems didn't work, or a worker was infected and walked out, or they took animals and sold animals outside of the laboratory. That's why I say it's important that we get to the bottom of it so we can learn more about the disease. China's not letting us get to the bottom of it, though.
And also, in addition, these capitals around the world looks like they have infected, if you don't mind, the World Health Organization with this propaganda as well. It seems to me, they were very defensive of China.
Much of what the World Health Organization has done from a communication standpoint has been focused on not offending the Chinese Communist Party.
Amazing. Well, I was going to say, have they done one thing right, or do we not believe them that they've got no new cases? If it's true that they've got no new cases or very few new cases, is there something we can learn from them? Or was this just the advantage of a totalitarian state? You can tell people X and they'll obey.
So I saw a headline today that says, in fact, no, it wasn't a headline, Bill. It was a statement of the World Health Organization said in a remarkable achievement, China has no reported cases as of today. No new reported cases. Like the key word in that sentence is reported. You should not believe that the Chinese Communist Party has conquered this virus. What they have done, in addition to the large-scale lockdowns that go far beyond what any mayor or governor have done or what President Trump has authorized, because, again, they are a communist state, it's just ordered people to go back to work or ordered people to show up at work. And I think you're probably going to see a second spike in the virus there. We may not know about it in real time. We may not know about it for years to come until the true story is written because of lies coming out of China.
Or order the person who's dying. You're not dying. Yeah. Order the coroner.
Well, and remember, the difference between General Secretary Xi and President Trump or Prime Minister Trudeau or President Macron or Prime Minister Johnson is that General Secretary Xi does not care about his own people. He does not care. All those Western leaders are trying to save the lives of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of their citizens. If Xi has to endure a few 100,000, or for that matter, a few million deaths of his own people to get his economy moving again, or to tell the story that he wants to tell the world, to him, that's just breaking a few eggs to make an omelet.
A few eggs compared to the Great Leap Forward, sure. Let me ask you this then on the geopolitics. So you said a couple minutes ago, given that the American people are seeing this as Chinese virus, the president continues to call it that, good for him. This helps heighten awareness. The American people have also seen for the first time a president who's pretty tough on China. But explain to me this. Why all the kind words all the time? I don't care about the kind words about the Chinese people, but the president's kind words about Xi. Is this for diplomatic reasons so he can get more? A, and B, what about Wall Street and our president? They don't see China the same way. Can the president prevail over very powerful forces that want, give the Chinese access to markets and so on? How does that play out, or what's a strategy in order for the president and others like yourself to prevail?
Yeah, so I commend the president for standing up to all these stupid, politically correct questions he's been getting over the last few days about how it's mean and xenophobic to call it the China virus. It's an important point that he's making to the American people in the middle of an information war with the communist government. I know that the president understands that he has to maintain a working relationship with Xi Jinping in the same way that Ronald Reagan had to maintain a working relationship with Soviet general secretaries. Just because they're our adversary doesn't mean that we don't have to have a line of communication with them. And as president, that's part of the job. Maybe not one of the more pleasant parts of the job, but it's part of the job indeed. And then finally, I don't think the president is alone in trying to confront some of these multinational companies or Wall Street interests that have made so much money off China and may want to get back to business as usual. I hope that they will open their eyes, I should say, and be alive to the threat going forward once we're on the backside of this pandemic. But even if they're not, the American people who already had no love lost for China, I believe, are going to create a potent political force that will drive change in Congress with the support of the president of the kind that we have not seen over the last 30 years of China. Just look at Arkansas, Bill. Our farmers don't like China because they won't buy Arkansas rice. In fact, they steal proprietary biotechnology related to our rice. Our manufacturers don't like China because they took our jobs. Our entrepreneurs don't like China because they steal our intellectual property. Christians don't like China because they persecute Christians and force women to have abortions. There's virtually no one in Arkansas who doesn't have a reason to want to change our relationship with China, and that's replicated across all 49 other states.
That's good. That's good. So there is opportunity there. I'm also following, you probably know our friends on the now reconstituted Committee on the Present Danger China. They're doing some very good work, too. You've been in touch with them, I assume, at some point.
They're doing very good work, and it is a very present danger, Bill. And that's why I say it's so disappointing that our leaders didn't recognize this earlier. We should have taken the steps we needed over the last 30 years to keep our manufacturing jobs here in the United States. But if you were going to let another country take over your manufacturing sector, why would you have let the one that has 1.3 billion people and a clear and announced intent to try to replace you as the world's superpower? Why wouldn't you work more with Mexico or Vietnam or the Philippines, Japan, South Korea? I mean, again, we should have kept all those jobs here, but the last place we should have sent them, the last place we should have tried to integrate into our economy in a dangerous fashion is a sworn mortal adversary.
Excellent. Right. Absolutely. I'm told I have 2 minutes left with you quickly. Just another topic. Not so sure about the First Step Act. It seems to me, I love the president, but boy, I think a lot of bad guys are getting released. And now because of the coronavirus, I was reading Philadelphia's not going to arrest people for major drug dealing. When did major drug dealing get so readily called nonviolent? I'll pause there. I just don't understand this because the prisoners are too close together. This is why we're releasing people. This whole frame of mind, a story of the United States I know and respect very much is we go from crunchy to soft, we go soft and crunchy, soft and crunchy. This seems a little too soft and dangerous.
I'm very worried about some of these communities like San Francisco, like Philadelphia, even Northern Virginia as well, in which you have these far left-wing, really radical prosecutors who in many cases have been funded either publicly or secretly through George Soros organizations. It's very hard to influence the presidential election if you're a rich guy. It's pretty hard to influence statewide elections, but a local election for prosecutor, it doesn't take much money to have overwhelming influence in that. And that George Soros and all of these other radical left-wing forces who want to decriminalize violent crime have helped elect true radicals in places like San Francisco and Philadelphia that is not just saying we should let out at-risk prisoners, Bill. They're announcing in advance we're not going to do things like respond to calls for carjackings or burglaries. Well, if you tell hardened criminals we're not going to respond to burglary calls or arrest people for burglary, guess what you're going to have happen? A lot more burglaries. At a time when a lot of businesses are boarded up. Exactly right.
And then they wonder why people are buying more guns, and isn't that terrible? Well, that's a very good reason for people to buy guns in a lot of communities. Very good reason. Senator, I got to thank you. I got to let you go. It's always great to talk to you. We try to use your time wisely, and we so much appreciate you being out there and leading. Applaud you every time we see you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bill. Always good to be on with you.
You're listening to The Bill Bennett Show.